Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. I have an itch. Let's watch.
Goes, so are you like trying to get me to end it with you? And I was like, huh? I feel like she was like trying to flip it on me too. And I was like, I kind of just told you like that I have really strong feelings for another girl. Like, I thought that was relatively clear.
Okay, well, that's... What is he saying here? It certainly... let's go back.
To see that through.
Yeah.
And she goes, so are you like trying to get me to end it with you? And I was like, huh? I feel like she was like trying to flip it.
Trying to flip it on me? What in the world is he saying? What is he possibly saying? What he's describing is he says that he told her that Molly, that he wants to see it through with Lauren. And then he is recalling that Molly says, so do you want to break up with me? Which, I reacted to at the time of just like, okay, Molly is just essentially being a breakup coach to him to break up with her, And then he says, huh? He recalls, huh? Why would you say that? I feel like you're trying to flip what on you? Flip what on you? So this fits within my hypothesis, which is very tentative because I have no idea, of him having a complex, originally starting with him being emotionally neglected to the point where he neurologically and consciously turns away from attunement and from connection and other people, and doesn't signal, doesn't show emotion, subdues his emotion, feels like he doesn't have emotion, even though he does, and then proceeds forward with that defense, denying him his needs, but it helps him get by. There's a lot of unmet needs that are plaguing him, but he is surviving day to day. He's able to function. And then he, at some point, is being perceived, maybe even by the original neglector, maybe his mom, maybe his sister, I don't know, maybe someone else, as being inconsiderate of their feelings and would express hurt and say, hey, you are not considerate of my feelings. And for the Daves of the world in a situation, I don't know if this is Dave, but for this hypothesis, for people that experience that, it can be very confusing because, at least unconsciously, they know that they only turned away because they weren't being heard. They weren't being seen with their emotion. And so they're just keeping their distance because it's the only way to survive. And because of that, now I'm being accused of, you were the one who caused me, you taught me to turn away, and now you're angry at me, and you're saying that I'm worthless, or I'm not a good person, or I'm not a good son because I'm neglectful. Hello, when I was 18 months old, you were the neglectful one. I came into this world assuming people were not going to be that way, and you taught me that. So I learned from the best, and now you created me, and now you're upset at me. And I'm being told that I am my worst nightmare because deep down I hate people that are not attentive, and I'm being accused of being not attentive. Oh my God, I am the devil. Metaphorically, I'm the enemy. It can have that. And so as he's breaking with Molly, there were indications of that. As he was crying about, worrying about getting closer to Lauren, right? There are indications of that, of, oh shit, if I get close, then I will be that person that will be neglectful. I will break up. I will reject. I will move on. And then it'll just be another moment where I'm worthless and I'm the enemy. Then in this moment, or his narrative, is still struggling with what he just did, just minutes before having broken up with Molly. He has to reckon with being the enemy, being the neglector, being the rejecter once again. And he has been accused of that unfairly. A number of, the integrity and the mom was on him about stuff. Who knows? I don't know if it was in this category or it was a lot of things, but it's a lot of speculation here. But then, and I use this speculation not as a way of understanding Dave, but as a way of proposing a profile that I have treated so that you can contemplate it for yourself in your own life or you're a therapist and you can have another option of conceptualization when you see data along these lines. So for him, he is recalling minutes later, after being the enemy and being the rejecter of Molly, and he is jumbled up around it. He can't process it. He doesn't know what to do with it. He cannot be the rejecter because that means he's worthless and he's the enemy and it's all his fault, and he is a bad boy. He's a bad son. He's a bad brother. I have avoided my whole life this scenario, but I need closeness. So I'm like this little boy inside. Anyway, and so part of him is acknowledging the reality of what happened, where he says, yeah, I want to see it through with Lauren, but he does not want to be the one breaking up. So he either unconsciously engineered, so she was the one that laid it out, but she laid it out as his choice. She didn't walk out of the room. And we can absolutely imagine in past relationships, maybe even him referring to himself as an ass in the past, as he would say, ass in the past, that he would provoke women to the point where they would leave him, and then he would rather be dumped than be the dumpee because of all that shame and all that worthlessness and all that confusion. So, and this is a very common profile, by the way. It's not rare. It's not the majority of people, but it's common enough that it's very familiar to me. So in this moment, he could be jumbling up all of what happened to try to fit the data into, she was the one that left me. I didn't do that. She left. But in his head, he knows, well, she didn't really break up with me. So that doesn't really fit the facts. But she was trying to flip it on me. She was trying to make me out to be the bad guy when there is no bad guy. He needed to pick one, and he picked one. And Molly doesn't blame him for that.
On me too, and I was like, I kind of just told you that I have really strong feelings for another girl. I thought that was relatively clear.
But I don't know if I'm reading it right, because there's a real confusion in what he's saying. Flip what on? I could be completely misunderstanding. I probably am. I don't know. But at the very least, he's saying, I thought I was relatively clear. No, you were not. But it could feel that way to him because of his lack of experience and his desire to avoid being the bad guy, and how far he went into breaking up, which was not far, is so farther than he's typically going that it feels very clear to him when it was not.
Clear.
I will say, she was definitely, I don't know, she's hurt. I think she,
anyone's going to be hurt after this process.
I think there are probably times or things that you said.
So I don't know if I'm just shoving everything into my hypothesis, but she is, I think, standing up for Molly in a sense by saying, oh, well, you think she doesn't care, but she does, and she was hurt. I think it is accurate for Lauren to be a little vague or confused as to what, because Molly didn't say as she was crying, I'm devastated because he broke up with me. She was crying amidst talking with Lauren about regret, about talking about her connection with Dave in the lounge. So I think Lauren is intuiting, which I think is safe to say, that Molly was hurt about being dumped. But as soon as she says that, it's interesting, and I'll rewind this, that Dave very quickly says, well, anyone would be. Why would he say it? It's like, well, I don't know if I'm shoving everything into this hypothesis, but he is avoiding so greatly the reality or the notion that he caused someone hurt, that he's like, well, anyone would be. It's common. It's a really common thing.
She was definitely, I don't know, she's hurt. I think she
anyone's going to be hurt after this process.
I think there are probably times or things that you said that made her feel like you were choosing her as number one.
For sure. And I totally understand how that can get the communication and everything is very hard.
Okay. That's in the right direction. He could have completely denied. So, no, she's Delulu or whatever. So he's agreeing in as much as I think that I could expect him to. And it's hard to know if he's really admitting this to himself, but he's in that direction. It would have been more encouraging if he said something like, I probably was too optimistic when I was having dates with her. I mean, I think a completely understandable narrative that he would say is, throughout the 10 days, I have been vacillating between you and her. And when I was in front of each of you, I would really be feeling it. And I was really confused for a good portion of time. Eventually, I had realized, no, I want to be with Lauren. Eventually, they're going to have that conversation, right? I mean, but this is important. Lauren has these questions of like, well, what's going on with you? Is this real? I was going back and forth, and I was irresponsible at times by being too communicative about how I felt in the moment. But he did occasionally say, I am connecting with other people, but he could very viably say I was too ready to say what I was feeling and not holding back a little bit, which I should have been, because as soon as I left Molly and I was with you, those feelings were, greatly attenuated, and I was misleading. But I wasn't lying, and I did feel those feelings, but it was irresponsible, and I just didn't predict that this would happen, because I could absolutely see him when he was being communicative to Molly about wanting to be with her, that in his heart he believed she's the one. Now, another interpretation of this that I think I've been talking about is that he is picking not on who he wants to be with, but who he believes will be hurt the most if he's not with. You know what I'm saying? That he is solely focused, based on his traumas, on not hurting other people and their feelings, that he predicted Molly would be less hurt if he broke up with her. And so that's the only reason why he is choosing Lauren. I wouldn't be surprised. His communication isn't really saying otherwise. I would imagine in this moment, with the freedom of, okay, Molly, I broke up with her in this very roundabout way, but now it's just me and Lauren. Hallelujah, Lauren, let's do it. Some energy, some internal desire, but it's just further rehashing of that, right? And I think he's also trying to get out. I think he accurately intuits that Lauren is upset at him, critical of him being misleading, and that's his sole focus, right? He's just trying to get out, but he's not. There's a lot worse things he could be saying, and a lot of his, I don't know if his inaccuracies here could be due to wishful thinking or just bad memory. So I want to say that because it could be interpreted that he's just straight up lying, and he could just not really remember everything that he said. I mean, the conversation of the ring was pretty long.
Hard.
Yeah.
But she wasn't my number one. And for her to say that I said she was my number one, if I said that, that would have been a lie, because you've been my number one for the past, as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they don't get engaged. I wonder if Lauren is like, something's not right here, and I can't move forward. The look on her face kind of has that look to it. He's not completely inaccurate, I want to say, whether that's lying or he doesn't remember or he's just trying to spin things, which a lot of people will do. But he said, you've been my number one for a long time. Okay, what's that mean? Is that a couple days? It's certainly, because I thought he was going to say, you've been my number one this whole week, but we know that's not true. And this has happened before on the show, where the Daves intend on saying, you are high on my list, and I really want to continue dating you, and I'm really feeling it with you. That's what they want to say, which is fine. But what they say is in the direction of, or I'm trying to think of an example, what they say is something like, well, right now, Molly, I could see, you feel like my number one right now. That's kind of a good one. Like, you really, if I had to make a decision right now, it would be you. Okay. Then the Mollys of the world will hear, I'm your number one for sure, and we're definitely going to get engaged soon. Then she goes back to the lounge, says, I have a husband, and oh my God, Dad. But the Daves of the world think, and maybe credibly so, that they didn't say that, because they didn't say that. But they said something a little bit beyond what they intended to say. We've seen that before. And I think that's just really hard for cast members in a situation like this to not do that, especially if they're thinking, this could be the one, and I don't want to lose them, and I don't want to hurt them, and I want to tell them how I feel. And not everyone is, I mean, how would people have practice in navigating that, right? So, and you're caught up in the moment, blah, blah, blah. I think that's what happened with him, as it has with a lot of people. And I would hope that in all of this, and maybe, over time he can look back and have a little bit more differentiation and say, yeah, I think because he should really eventually, maybe now, maybe for the benefit of Lauren trusting him, admit to all this instead of basically giving the impression that Molly was just making shit up. He's not saying that directly, but he is essentially saying that. And Lauren, it's interesting that she could trust, especially coming on the heels of really bonding very quickly with Molly, that Lauren could believe Molly more than Dave. I think normally we'll see the opposite. And it's just unfortunate because I think I understand why Dave is doing this. And it's not necessarily an indicator that he's a liar and a deceiver and a gaslighter and all that stuff, right? I mean, he could be, but he doesn't have the overall presentation of that. Now, I would predict that even under the best of circumstances, that a relationship with Dave would carry a lot of risk with it. Not because he's a jerkface, but because he's got a lot to sift through. He's at the very beginning of a lot of issues that need a lot of therapy. So I think if this ends or doesn't go well, I think it's probably to some extent inevitable. I hate to say that. But I don't know. I could see we're all wounded souls, and that if things go well, I don't know. You probably know because you have watched ahead.
Is like, oh my God, what am I saying right now?
Let it out, please.
But like that's where I'm like having loving feelings for you. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what you look like.
Yeah.
But like, and I didn't come here to do what I always do and like run away from my feelings and run away from what's real.
Yeah, it's great that he is authentic and saying these things because this is what's happening for him. And it's not his fault that he has that tendency to run. That comes from his early childhood in all likelihood. So it's all real, but it's not a recipe for success in that, because we've seen a lot of people have these kinds of upwellings of feelings. And of course there would be hesitation in a lot of people, but he's so jumbled up and busted up about it as he is now that they're free to love each other. It's clean now. It's just me and you. And as he is expressing that, there's all these defenses and like confusions and impulses to run and it's hard to know, right? Are you pushing forward because you're trying not to engage in the defenses, or are you pushing forward because you're genuinely in love with someone? That's why therapy is recommended.
Like I literally think I am like falling in love with you, and that freaks the shit out of me. To be quite, don't laugh.
I'm like smile laughing.
Okay.
Like I'm like, this is what I've wanted to hear for like a while.
Yeah.
My gut reaction is like laughing, being like, oh my God, is this real?
Yeah.
There's an interesting moment. She chuckles in the way that she described, which is the way that it looked. And it seemed to actually concern him, make him upset, make him feel like she's laughing at him, which is telling, I think.
I didn't even feel like I was inside my body. Yeah, it's terrifying to me. Part of what's freaking me out too is my sister. I don't want her to freak out. I love her so much.
Yeah.
I really hope she can find a way to understand this.
Yeah, it's consistent, but so interesting. You just sense, or I sense, as he expresses himself and allows himself to feel, allows himself to fall in love, immediately these things get enacted in him. And that is not a good sign. It's one thing, we've seen it before, other cast members have had major concerns that their dad or someone would disapprove, and then what, right? Some cast members would say, I'm sorry, but if my father says it's a no-go, then we're not getting married. I'm so sorry, you know? And, you know, there are cultural differences and family differences and whatnot. And I think literally every time that's happened, it's worked out for the individuals. You know, the other people, the family members have come around, often pretty quickly. So, you know, like with Amy and Johnny, that kind of stuff. So, you know, people will have that, but not here. They won't talk about it here. Not in this way. And it's his sister. It's not a parent. And I don't think this is the cultural norm, right? If it's the cultural norm that your parents or your dad or your mom or whoever is extremely scrutinized. I mean, I just think about my Korean American friends, and not all, but frequently there can be a concern there of parental disapproval of your choice of partner, that kind of stuff. And I'm not disparaging all Korean Americans, but a good portion of my Korean American friends. Anyway, so I don't think that this is a cultural aspect for him. I can't know that. So this is particular. This is something having to do with the family dynamic, something having to do with the sister, something having to do with the parents. I don't know. But as he's falling in love, this sister is there. And if they get engaged, which is kind of looking like it's going to happen, are we going to meet the sister? I could see the sister refusing to come on the show because of her disapproval, generally speaking, right? I'd be really curious to see what happens there and to learn what is going on.
I never, ever, ever thought I was going to get to this point. I was just like looking back through my notes about you. This is like me reassuring myself about it. I was like, I can see myself proposing to Lauren. We like tequila tasting, Italian date nights, snorkel shots. But then also like I thought about her all night.
This is a good move. You know, whether it's some sort of manipulation, I don't think it is, but I think it's a good move, and might even be good for him to review. You know, he's going back through his notes to reassure himself maybe that this is the right choice. But it's also good for her because she would have these questions, having the entire closeness with him with the parallel of, but Molly seems to think that she's number one, so I have to, every good feeling I have towards Dave, it has this asterisk, and now that I have him, I still have that asterisk, so to hear this would help. It's, I think, good for both of them. It would be interesting, right, to go to have that record. And I'm a journaler, so I have things like that. But if you aren't a journaler, then you wouldn't. But it would be interesting, right, to read your thoughts and feelings after the first date, or as you're, you know, wondering, is this the one?
Like that, and I feel that way with you.
'Cause I know I'm falling in love.
I thought you were the one that couldn't express your feelings. Like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah, I can't, so I don't know.
Are you kidding me? This was like a playbook on how to tell me where you're at and like reassure me with where you're
Yeah, and I'm glad that she's saying that to establish a different narrative. Because it is interesting that if we zoom out a little bit, he's the one who says he has the most trouble with emotion, but who has emoted the most? And I think been really genuine in his expression and exploration, his verbal description. Now, there are some moments where it's a problem and he is seeing things in a distorted way, like saying that Molly was flipping it back on him or something. You know, it's not all fun and games, but I think he is very good. And I would have that impulse, I think, if I were in her shoes as well, because I would want him to recognize, I would want him to feel good, but I'd also want him to change his identity of himself, of someone that is actually pretty good with emotions and is, you know, fairly expressive and feeling of emotions, because people tend to act the way they feel that they are, and they also tend to act the way they are told that they are. So when you believe in someone and say, actually, I don't think you're weird with emotions at all. I think you're human. In fact, I think you express and understand and are willing to be vulnerable more than most people. So, and whether that's true or not, if there's enough reason to say that genuinely, it's an attractor. I learned this when I worked with youth, that believing in people, and this is true for anyone of any age, but it was more, I guess, relevant with teenagers that I was working with, that when I believed in them as the vision of what would be ultimately more functional for them, then that was a gravitational force. Whereas if I participated in what a lot of people were doing, which was to assume the worst in the kid, then the kid would go in that direction, right? I might hear from the parents that the kid didn't do their homework and skipped class and got home, and the parents lectured him and he was dismissive of the whole thing. And then I hear about it, and I have enough reason and enough rapport with him to say the following, even though the whole situation could be described in a lot of different ways. I wouldn't frame it as the way I'm about to frame it, because I'm trying to trick or create a narrative that I hope for. I would literally see this, and I would just be emphasizing those things that I see. And I might say something like, well, so after hearing your side of the story, what I see, and I don't know how other people see it, but I don't know how you see it, but the way I see it is that you're trying to build a good life, and you're also trying to get through the day, and you don't always like to do homework, and you don't always like to be in class, and that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. You go to a lot of classes. You only skipped one, so obviously, on average, you like going to classes, or at the very least can tolerate it. And for whatever reason, you didn't want to go to that one class, or it was too much, or you just wanted a break, and you took that. And yeah, it's probably not the most constructive choice, given that you're under the watchful eye of everyone right now. But it doesn't make you a bad person. And like I said, most of the time you do go to class. And okay, your grades are slipping a little bit, but you're still doing some of your homework. And there's no real concrete, no one's paying you, no one's putting a gun to your head to do your homework, and yet you do a lot of it. So you have that desire. And when you sit down and you think about homework, a lot of the time you decide to do it because that's what you want to do. You know that you could blow it off if you want to, clearly, because you do sometimes, and yet most of the time you do it. You know you could skip class and nothing horrible is going to happen to you. You're going to have a lot of people upset with you, but yet you decided so often to go to class. Today you went to 5 out of 6 classes. That was your choice because you care to some extent about your future and about not bothering people around you. You want to do the right thing. You want to be liked. You want your parents to be proud of you. You want your teachers to not yell at you. You want those things. And that is very, very clear to me. Okay, so end of role play. I mean, some of that I role played, I'm like, I don't know. But you get my point. And I'm not just looking on the bright side. In order to be an effective therapist, strength-based person, and to reframe things in that way, you have to believe it. And I learned to discard the negative, problem-based way of seeing everything, right? And and people that understand behavior, particularly when you're trying to work with kids, and really other mammals, any animal that you're trying to train, a dog, a dolphin, that punishment is not an effective way of shaping behavior. The way to shape behavior is through rewards, through attractors, right? And so anyone that knows anything about behaviorism and about helping kids to follow rules and helping a dolphin to jump out of the water when you want them to is you use the sardine, you do not use the whip, right? And so the same goes in a situation like this. And so for her, that's what she's doing. She could say, when he is being unemotional, see, you're doing it. But right now, she's capitalizing that. And so we can use this as jumping off point. If you want to train your partner, you have, and I tell this to clients all the time, it's not emphasized enough in life, and I think maybe not enough in therapy. that when your partner does even remotely close to what you want from them, then you pounce on that shit and highlight it and thank them. You will change them very quickly. If all that you do, there's a form of parenting therapy that is called PCIT, and the method is that it's typically done with infants and their parents. So you have one parent and the infant in a lab behind a one-way, sometimes it's literally called a one-way mirror and sometimes it's called a two-way mirror. Go figure. The same thing. The mirror that you can only see through from one side. And on the other side of the one-way or two-way mirror, but never three-way and never zero-way, and then what's a regular mirror called? Zero-way or a regular mirror? Anyway, the PCIT specialist is on the other side and maybe two or three people, depending. And there's a phone. And so the therapist, and I've supervised people that do this work, the therapist watches the parent parenting the child. And typically the reason why a parent would be in the lab would be because they have big problems with their parenting. And they've been identified as such, and the very expensive form of therapy is authorized by typically the government, which is another important feature of government and of taxes and of responsible federal and state spending, by the way, because those kids who have that kind of therapy grow up to, at the very least, if you look at it non-selfishly, tend to be productive members of the capitalist system and don't, they're not a drain on the money, but I would hope that people would have moral compassion for those children. Anyway, so the way of changing the parent's behavior, the parent might be mildly abusive, and we're observing that. And there's a line, but concerning behavior, but you don't say anything. It would be typical, or you would imagine, intuitive anyway, that you got to pounce on it. No, don't do that. That's not what you do. You wait until the parent does something that is at least in the right direction. You call them up and you say, what you just did that right there, that was amazing. I just want to say that. You don't even say, do it more. You don't have to. You just say, when you said that thing to your kid, or when you were interacting, or it could be mundane. It could just be like the parent is just having a really normal interaction, but it's devoid of any of the bad stuff. And you call up the parent, you say, what you're doing right now it's really, really wonderful. I can really see that you're a good parent. That was really good parenting. That's all. That's the whole method. And the outcomes are, in general, empirical evidence, positive. Parents exhibit more and more of the good behavior and less of the bad behavior. We understand this. Behaviorism has been around for over a century, and these principles were understood a long time ago. So with you and your partner, and it's so rare that people will do this, that it's cheesy, right? It'll be perceived as, I was looking for my coffee mug because I think the coffee mug I have today is the one that says, if being corny is being healthy, then be corny. And it feels corny when your partner is doing something positive to say like, ooh, I really like that, thanks. Or, well, that makes me feel good, or whatever. There's a lot of different ways. You don't have to sit them and go, say, when you did that thing yesterday, that was really nice, and I want you to do that more. Yeah. But don't say do it more, because that implies a criticism in a way. It's just in the moment, you're just giving feedback about how this is feeling. Oh, I like that, thanks. Or that is so great that you did that. That's great. It's light, it's positive, right? And the attractor. So she is doing that, which is a great impulse and a recipe. I'm looking for optimism within their relationship, and that gives me some optimism. But I would not put a lot of money down on a great amount of possibility of success for the two of them. But maybe success isn't necessarily that they'll get married and yes at the altar, but maybe success is that they both are given an opportunity to grow with minimal amounts of damage and harm to the two of them. I think that would be success. All right, well, let's adjourn there. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.